weekend. The reason being, we arrived here at the circuit at around about 8:30 this morning, and it was very foggy indeed. So the DTM free practice session, which preceded this Formula 3 session, this Formula 3 race, had to be delayed and has only just been completed. It was far too foggy. There was barely any visibility, and we had to wait for it to be cleared by the sun, which has now happily broken through the clouds. And so you can see the Formula 3 cars just heading to the pit lane, through the pit lane, and about to make their way out onto the grid, ready for the start procedure. So we have a slight start to proceedings in terms of delay, but we'll be getting the cars on track very shortly indeed. So a fantastic weekend in prospect, a weekend in which the 2017 championship title could be decided in terms of the drivers, and with the key runners in the championship all having qualified very well at the head of the field in yesterday evening session, because it was very late on yesterday when we had the qualifying session. The cars only came off track just after 6 o'clock last night. It's slightly overcast and almost drizzly conditions, and just about avoided a few spots of rain which were hovering around the circuit as we had the qualifying session, but it was an incredibly close session, and it's always incredibly close racing here as well. Callum Ilott, the driver that has picked up his pole position here, and a very important one as well, because he's one of the championship hopefuls trying to catch up with the points leader Lando Norris, but there was only 16 thousandths of a second in it in that qualifying session yesterday. A great qualifying session between Callum Ilott, who eventually got the pole position on the very last, or his very last lap of the session, and his Prema Power team teammates, last year's runner-up Max Günther, the German driver, who kept trading positions. Those two were a couple of tenths clear of anybody else, but then it was incredibly close between the next group of 5 or 6 drivers, all within the same tenth of a second of each other. Joel Eriksson coming back to form, it seems, having struggled with the balance of the car recently. He had a very good session yesterday to qualify 3rd for Motor Park, and the championship leader Lando Norris 4th, and, well, slightly disappointed as he got out of the car in 4th place, but that just shows the very high standards that he's set himself so far this year. But he arrives here with a healthy championship lead. There are 25 points, of course, available for each race victory. There are 3 races here and 3 races to come in a couple of weeks' time at Hockenheim for the final event of the season. So we have 150 points available, and he's on 381 points, Lando Norris. Max Günther, his nearest rival, on 308 points. So 73 the difference between them. If he can walk away here, Lando Norris, with 75 points or more advantage, be able to wrap up the championship title. So it is up to the others to beat him this weekend, and they've got to start doing that here. But as I say, Ilott, Günther and Eriksson, who are trying to catch Norris, are all going to be ahead of him on the grid. So good morning from me, Chris Hartley, trackside here, overlooking the fabulous view across the back of the circuit, and right down below us, casting slight shadow from the big grandstand that we've got here, overlooking the start-finish line. We can see the grid girls down on underneath the commentary box ready, and you can see the low cloud that has been hovering above us, which was part of the cause of this lack of visibility we had, and the delayed start. So cars coming to the grid. As I say, I'm Chris Hartley. I'm going to be talking you through the races this weekend, and alongside me in the commentary box, it's good morning to Leo Gorman.
Yeah, Chris, and yes, we very, very, very low cloud this morning. Very difficult to see anything. We were quite surprised because when we left our hotel this morning, we saw the mist in the distance. Didn't really think too much of it. Thought it was probably going to clear away. But then we actually got to the circuit and it just descended.
Worse here than everywhere, wasn't it?
Yeah. And once we got out of the car, you just took a look out and you knew nothing was going to run for a while. So we had a bit of a delay. Hopefully we'll be back on track soon enough. We're running a little bit late, but you know, I think we're going to be in. It's a very nice morning now. Bit cool. Which changes things because it means that the track temperature is lower than anticipated. So maybe could have a little issue with some of the drivers warming up the tyres to the temperature that they want. It could make for a very interesting first lap on coolish tyres, especially when we're getting down to turn 2. It's a long downward stretch into that tight right-hand bend, and this could be. You know, it could make things very, very interesting because this is where incidents happen.
Yeah, it's a steep run, isn't it? You can kind of appreciate it from the television pictures, but when you're actually here and you stand near the start grid and you look up to turn 1, it is a steep, short but steep climb up to turn 1, which means they can brake very late there because they've got that helping to slow the cars down as well, which means they'll go guns blazing. You do what is quite a tight 90-degree right hand of the first corner, so it does tend to filter up through there. And so that made qualifying even more important yesterday because you not really want to be in the middle of the pack here going into that first turn, and then up at the top of the hill as well when they continue to climb on. It's a very undulating circuit. Again, it tightens up with the hairpin.
It's going to make Norris's start all the more interesting. Is he going to gun it and absolutely go for it and maybe go for as many points as possible? Or is he going to be more contemplative this morning? Is he going to say, actually, you know what, 4th place, maybe 3rd, that'd actually be a good catch this morning? Knowing that he's got 2 drivers behind him, Makino and Mazepin, who can be quick. Makino definitely improving a lot the last couple of rounds. He really seems to have found something in the car and to really be able to drive it quick. But he, in a sense, they're 2 unknown quantities to him, because Norris, for most of the season, he's been driving up front. He's been racing with Ericsson. He's been racing with Gunther. He's been racing with Eilert. Hasn't had much experience of racing against Mazepin and Makino. So I think sometimes drivers can get a little bit wary about guys around them that they don't normally race against. So
yeah, you need to be able to know and to trust the guys you are racing with, because you are racing within centimetres of each other, and you need to know exactly where they're going to brake, exactly where you think they're going to turn in, and to have some predictability there. So definitely a potential issue for him. Something that doesn't seem to be an issue anymore, which was definitely a bit of a problem for Lando Norris at the start of the season. He starts getting off the line in these F3 cars. He's now got that pretty much sorted, hasn't he? And he's been able to go on this great run of form recently, which has projected him up into this 73-point championship lead. I mean, since the Norris Ring, he's barely been off the podium. The first race at the Norris Ring, which was 4 rounds ago, was the last time he wasn't on the podium.
He's taken 6 race wins in the last 9 races,
yeah.
And it's actually contributed an awful lot to his big turn in form. He's finally nailed that, what was missing at the start, and he's finally got it. He's finally understanding what actually he needed to get the car off the line properly. And what's actually impressive about that run is, yes, he had a lot of bad starts at the start of the season, but you know, he actually still pulled a lot of very good results out of the bag despite losing positions, and actually remained in the championship hunt despite often finishing lower than where he qualified. But this run of the last 3 rounds has just solidified really how good and how dominant a driver he can be when everything absolutely comes together.
That's right. He's got tremendous pedigree, of course, through the previous junior Formula, having come into this with several titles under his belt last year, predominantly the Formula Euro Cup in Formula Renault with 5 wins last year, champion in that, the Northern European Formula Renault champion, 6 wins in that. Over the winter period, he won the Toyota Racing Championship down in New Zealand as well. And no wonder that he's been picked up by Formula 1 by McLaren, and last year the winner of the prestigious UK award for recognising up-and-coming talent, the McLaren Autosport BRDC award. So Lando Norris, the championship leader, 4th on the grid. Despite all of that, it is still very difficult to come into what is an incredibly difficult championship in your first season and compete as well as he has. So all credit to him. Lots of experience in other cars, but it doesn't necessarily set you up for Formula 3. But it's Callum Ilott that's got the pole position, as we say, for Prema Power Team. And that is exactly the tonic he needed. That's his 10th career pole, and he's levelled now the number of pole positions that Lando Norris has secured this season. They've both now had 8 pole positions each. So it's a Prema Power Team 1-2. Prema have been, by their incredibly high standards, slightly off the ball in recent rounds. Ilott and Gunther share the front row of the grid. Joel Eriksson and Lando Norris on the second row, as we say. Tadasuke Makino, the Japanese driver, improving all the time. The high-tech Grand Prix driver was only a few thousandths slower than Lando Norris and will start 5th. A very good qualifying session for his teammate, the Russian driver Nikita Mazepin, who's going to be lining up 6th. And then David Bettman is going to be lining up 7th. Joey Mawson qualified 8th, but one of several drivers that carries a penalty in this race. So he gets a 3-place grid penalty carried over from the previous round. And Ferdinand Habsburg, the local favourite, the sole Austrian in the field, who was a little bit displeased, let's say, with being 10th fastest yesterday. Wanted to go much better here in his home race. Lots of support for the Austrian driver. He's a descendant, a great-grandson of the last emperor of this country, Austria. But he only qualified 10th and then gets a 3-place grid penalty as well. And afraid Jake Hughes had an engine change yesterday, which means he gets a 10-place grid penalty for the first race. Having recently picked up his first win in the championship. He qualified 12th, but with a 10-place grid penalty, he's going to be put right to the back of the grid, I'm afraid.
And you see Maxi Gunther there, the second in the championship. And now on screen is guy 3rd in the championship, Joel Eriksson. Now, Eriksson 3rd on the grid, and Eilert in pole position, they need a major result in this race. Whereas, yes, the championship may be carried forward by Gunther's challenge to Eilert. Joel and Callum could actually fall out of the championship running in this race. Callum is 121 points behind. Joel is 116 points behind Eilert. There's 150 available. There'll be 125 available at the end of this race. So they need massive results. And talking to Callum's mum yesterday, I think they understand it's going to be an incredibly, almost impossible task at this stage, but they also want to finish on a high, because Callum is a very fast driver. He really knows what he's doing. He's very talented behind the wheel, and he's a guy who could really do an awful lot in motorsport. So they want to finish on the high, grab some race wins, and make sure people are still talking about him once the season actually finishes.
Exactly right, yeah. It's very important for him to do that, and all he can do is do his job now and try and win the races this weekend. They've got another qualifying session later on this afternoon, which will then go towards the grid for the second and third races. Fastest lap for race 2, second fastest lap for the third race. That was David Bettman, the teammate, or one of the teammates to Joel Eriksson for Motorpark. Joel Eriksson, and prior to that, his older brother Jimmy Eriksson, with a long connection with the Motorpark team, Timo Ronkkar's team, who have stood by him. There were lots of other teams interested in picking up Joel Eriksson this season. But David Bettman coming in after a couple of rounds of the season, started with the Van Amersfoort team, switched across to Motorpark, and it's been helpful, I think, I would say, for Joel Eriksson to have the extra input of another quick driver like David Bettman within the team. Very young driver from Dortmund, just 17 years of age, and last year missed the first couple of rounds of the season because he wasn't old enough to compete, but got a couple of third-place finishes at Zandvoort and Hockenheim. There is Harrison Newey, who in the qualifying session yesterday was sort of stuck in the midfield pack, which was very tightly bunched. I mean, a couple of tenths made a big difference between how many rows of the grid you ended up on. He was ninth on the grid, or ninth fastest, but promoted up to 8th after Joey Mawson's penalty, and promoted up to 9th place there. You can see Ralph Aron for High Tech Grand Prix. Race with the Prema Power team, came up through European karting and Italian Formula 4, and Ralph Aron would dearly like a good result here. And then you've got Guan Yu Zhu there for Prema Power team, who has been promoted up to 10th. They actually only qualified in 13th place, but has been bolstered up to 10th place because of the 3 drivers picking up these grid penalties ahead of him. So an opportunity here to pick up some good points. There is Joey Mawson then, 3 places lower down the grid than he would expect, or actually qualified, and the very likeable Australian driver here could do with a good weekend to get things back on track. He slipped to 12th in the overall championship, 4th in the rookie standings behind Lando Norris, Jehan Deravala and Mick Schumacher, and got a podium in the first race at the Nürburgring, his first podium last time out. So he's been picking up steadily points across the course of the season because he's learning all the circuits, he's learning the car, and a lot to do. Pedro Piquet back for another season, son of the multiple world champion, Formula 1 world champion Nelson Piquet, another of the Van Amersfoort racing drivers here, getting ready to go. He's directly underneath the commentary box actually, and one of the drivers on the inside line here, which is surely going to be the favourable line on that tight run up to turn 1.
It can be on the run down, but it actually becomes tricky when you're on the last approach to the corner, because the line really tightens up. If you're on the inside, it means you actually have to go in a little bit slower. You take a tighter line, and then you have a bit of a slower exit. However, if you're on the outside, yes, you've got a quicker approach into the corner, but you run the risk of actually going out wide and onto the runoff area and onto the big sausage curbs they have here. And that often drivers run wide because the drivers who are on the inside line overshoot the corner, and you kind of get an effect where everything kind of runs a little bit further wide. So it's very difficult to actually get a really clean line through that first corner at the start of the race. As we see Mick Schumacher, who actually set some decent times in practice 2 yesterday. He was 7th on the board, a 1:23.8. He improved his qualifying time. He was about half a tenth quicker in qualifying. But that ended up with him only being 14th on the grid, which actually shows you really how much a lot of the drivers around him improved from practice to qualifying. As they drew later on yesterday evening. So he's not going to be particularly happy with that. But
he's got pretty good race craft, though, hasn't he, Schumacher? He quite often comes forward from his qualifying position in the races. Well, and again, he's in his first season of F3, isn't he? With a good pedigree in Italian Formula 4, runner-up in that championship last year. And he might have won it had he been able to do every single race, every single round. But, as you say, it is a step up. They are all coming from Junior Formula, where in things like Formula 4, Formula Renault, they've all been champions, all been race winners out there, or the vast majority of them. So it's all down to tenths of a second, isn't it? I think
Mick he's one of these drivers, like lots of drivers, they come into a championship and they have good race pace, they have good long run pace, but sometimes the secret is just learning to unlock qualifying. Yeah. And that can be the difference between finishing 10th in the points and possibly winning a championship, because the gap here is so close. I mean, if we look at qualifying, Callum Ilott, 1 minute 23.3, you have to go to Schumacher, who's only 0.4 of a second slower. That's 14th on the grid. You know, a good learning to really qualify well can really be the difference here.
Exactly right, yes. You get the sense that there are at least 8 or 10 drivers on the grid here. If you stuck them on the front row, they'd probably certainly get a podium, probably go for a race win. But if you are equally back in 10th or 11th on the grid, it's hard to come through because it's so evenly matched. Engines are being fired up then as we get ready for the first race of the weekend, 33 minutes plus 1 lap. It will be for 73 points, to remind you, the championship lead for Lando Norris, with 150 still available, including the 25 points you can get for the race win here. Points available to the top 10. It's an FIA championship, so it's an FIA Formula 1 style point scoring system. 25, 18, 15 for the top 3 down to a point for 10th place. Max Gunter in second place on 308 points. 73 behind. Joel Eriksson really could do with getting some wins in here, and I'm sure he'll be going for it as well. It's the kind of driver he is. He's had 5 wins already this season. He's third on 265. He's only 5 points clear of the pole sitter Callum Ilott, who's fourth on 260 points and was a race winner here last year.
And it's interestingly enough, with Joel Eriksson as well, who Motor Park, by the way, third in the teams championship at the moment with 457. They're nearly 200 points behind the championship leaders, Prema. A lot of those scores have actually come from Joel Eriksson, who's been absolutely mighty this year. David Beckman made a late change from Van Amersfoort. He moved to Motor Park after round 4. The other two motorsport regulars, Kevin Andres and Marino Sato, have yet to actually score points yet this season. So in the teams championship, an awful lot of that has been down to Joel, who's been absolutely magnificent at times this year, and deservedly part of the BMW Young Drivers program as well.
Yeah, look at his options already for next year. There are several of them. Potentially DTM is one, but he certainly has the ability, the talent, the raw talent to continue his single-seater career if the opportunities arise for him. So Prema Power Team, as you say, leading the standings in terms of teams. 651 points. Carlin on 579. Motor Park third on 457. As you see the grid there, the top 10 as we gave it to you on screen. The rookie standings being led by Lando Norris on 500 points. Gian Derivala, who has had a disappointing qualifying session here, back in 15th place, the Indian driver, 428 points, second in the rookie standings. Mick Schumacher is third in the rookie standings on 352 points.
And these are actually quite important. They may seem like frivolous little titles, but they're really not, because one of the aspects of Formula 3 European Championship is there's actual prize money for the rookie standings, for the teams championship, and for the overall championship that drivers can use in the next step in the championship. Teams get there's a split fund of 200,000 euros or something along those lines. The winners of the rookie championship gets 100,000 euros if they use it in an FIA championship next year. So these championships are actually very important to these young drivers.
Exactly. And for the teams, you know, when they're trying to attract drivers for next year, it's very important for them to be able to say they did well in this year's championship. But all eyes certainly going to be on the Drivers' Championship. Max Gunter, runner-up to Lance Stroll last year, of course, has gone on to become a Formula 1 racer with Williams this year. Won't want to finish second again, so you can guarantee that Max is going to give it everything here. It's not almost no point finishing second again. You've got to go for it. Rennie Rossan there, second from the left of your picture, the team boss of Prema Power Team, looking pretty happy with life. He's got two of his drivers on the front row of the grid. And
it was his birthday last week as well.
All right. Yeah. Oh. Save some cake for us then. There's Schumacher, you see, pulling himself up onto the grid in the 25 car. There you can see a big crowd gathered here already. Sunshine out, and they're going to be treated to some fantastic racing here as we get ready for the 25th race of the season, the 2017 FIA Formula 3 European Championship. Callum Ilott, the British driver, on pole as the green flag is waved at the back of the grid. Max Gunter alongside him. Callum in the 53 car to the right of your picture gets a good start there. And Max Gunter going with him. Jarl Eriksson's made a decent start as well. Lando Norris just off them in 4th place here. Ericsson going around the outside into turn 1 to go 2nd. He splits the Prema cars up ahead of the pink machine of Max Gunter, which slips back to 3rd place. Lando Norris there in 4th position. I think Makino's made a decent start and he's hanging on to them as well as they climb up the hill for the first time in towards Remus. Through the kink here, and it's side by side for the lead of the race. Is it going to be Callum Ilott hanging on to it? Is Ericsson going to get here first? He's around the outside. He locks a brake up. He's still got his nose in front, but Callum Ilott, I reckon, is going to come back at him on the exit to the corner as they run down towards Rauch. So it's still going to be neck and neck for the lead of the race here. And yes, it is still side by side. Ilott's going to have the better race line here. He's in the lead. Lando Norris is about to slip back potentially to 5th place. Ilott leads just about. Ericsson tucks in behind in 2nd place. Max Gunter and Lando Norris.
And Habsburg, I believe that's Habsburg's gone off
the road
in turn 4. Turn 3, and he loses a ton of positions as Ilott leads from Ericsson. Gunter Norris having a look at Makino for 4th place. Doesn't quite get it there.
It's like Mick Schumacher was about to pull out of the slipstream and try and gain a place as well. You can see the bright yellow helmet going down the inside. I think it was a Guan Yu Zhu. He gained a place on his Prema teammate there. So that was very, very tight, wasn't it? Jarl Eriksson with a super start and piling the pressure on. He got straight into 2nd place, piling the pressure on the race leader, Callum Ilott, actually getting his nose in front a couple of times, but it is Ilott that leads by 0.4 of a second at the end of the first lap. Ericsson, Gunter, Makino with a great start from 5th up to 4th. Norris slipping back to 5th. Bettman then rounding out the top 6 at the end of the first lap. Maziban drops a place to 7th, Newey in 8th, Schumacher 9th at the end of the first lap. And then Habsburg coming through in 10th. So maybe that was not too much of a delay for him. I mean, after all, as they come back up to the top of the hill, the top 3 are still tied together here. And Makino and Norris, and to an extent Bettman, are not being shaken off in that second group, aren't they? They're hanging on to the leaders.
Absolutely, very good first lap there from Makino. He's really actually coming into his own as he develops as a driver in this European Championship, and it's good to see. We saw a bit of that at Nürburgring a couple of weeks ago, actually, so it's very good to see him in the top 4 as we see movement in the lower reaches. That is one of the Van Amersfoorts on a high-tech, which I'm assuming is Mawson on Sato, and I do believe it is, as we look at drivers at the very back. That's Habsburg. Getting a position after he lost quite a lot of places on that opening lap. It's the fastest first sector from Jarl Eriksson. No, he's not giving up. Took 0.2 of a second out of Callum Ilott, but then Callum Ilott responded. He was 0.3 quicker in the middle sector. We're going to see it again. It's like qualifying yesterday. They're going to be trading best sectors, personal best, fast sectors, and it's
all guns blazing. All guns blazing, just like it was in qualifying yesterday. Aran slipped to 19th on that first lap, so he had a bad first lap as well. Floresco, I think, was the one we saw probably going through the gravel trap. He had a very slow lap to drop to the back of the field. They're giving it everything here. Pinpoint precision required, but at a commitment as well. There is Callum Ilott, who has almost doubled his lead at the end of that second lap. He's gone from 0.4 of a second clear to 0.7 of a second clear there, and he's just set the fastest first sector. But then Ericsson goes quicker. Norris goes quicker through the first sector. Newey goes even quicker. It's all fractional, but a 22.3 through the first sector, the first of 3 time sectors on the lap for Harrison Newey. That bodes well for him. He's currently in 8th place and trying to find a way past Nikita Mazepan. Here come the top 3 then. Gunter just dropping off the tail a little bit. 4th and 5th still tied together here. And there you can see this battle involving Newey as well.
Mazepin. That's a battle over 6th and 7th place. And you know, that battle for those lower positions in the points are just as important to those drivers as the battles for the wins, because all of those drivers, like I said earlier on, they want to score points, they want to get good results, good rewards, because that's the kind of thing you can bring to a sponsor and say, you know, this is what I can do, these are my results, this is my achievements, I'm hoping to go one better, would you please come on board, etc, etc, etc.
So Makino going really well, vastly improved over the last few rounds. As you say, he picked up what looked like it was going to be a 4th place finish at the Nürburgring, and then got a post-race penalty which dropped him out of 4th, but then the next day he did finish in 4th place, so that's his best so far. He hasn't yet been on the podium, but he's levelling his best here after a very strong weekend at the Nürburgring last time out, in the very challenging wet weather conditions that we had at times in those races. Last year, the 19-year-old from Osaka was the runner-up in the Japanese Formula 4 Championship, and he's just fallen away a bit now. Lando Norris isn't exactly all over his case, though, is he, there with a luminous yellow trim and the number 31 car? The championship leader looks sort of settled enough in fifth place.
Oh, it's a spin! It's a spin, that is Mazepin.
Mazepin's had a spin, yeah, that at the first turn. Just off camera there, locking up, and I think he stalled the car, has he? So he's going to have to wait for the ball to come through. Can he get it going again? Fired up.
He needs to, otherwise they may call the safety car if he can't get it going, because that's in a very open area. I think he may well have actually stalled it.
Needs a hill start as well, which is going to make life even more difficult. Look at the climb there.
So has he just gone off by himself? As he come
down
into
Newey,
the hill? Oh, I think, punted. Absolutely punted from behind, and that was Newey behind him at the time.
Well, Newey was pulling out to go for the inside gap, and Mazepin covered off the line, went across, didn't he? And then they immediately came into contact. So they both have their own opinions about that, I think.
It was a bit of a half-hearted kind of... it was a half-hearted move, and also a half-hearted cover-up by both drivers as well. And he's actually damaged. You can see the left rear wheel is slightly askew. So I think this is going to be covered up. If they can get it turned, I think it'll be all right.
It's another angle. So Newey sees a gap, starts to go for it, and as soon as he does, that line is covered off. He didn't expect that to happen. The door slams, and the front of one car makes contact with the back of another. Newey loses place as well. Schumacher coming past there ahead of him.
Newey's pitted too. Newey pulls into the pits. He's got damage on the left front, I'm assuming.
Yeah, wing damage, I would imagine. So Newey into the pits here. Eilert continuing to lead the race by 0.7 of a second here.
And, yeah, I mean, Ericsson did get a little bit closer that time round, because Eilert did pull slightly away, but you're right, it's still 0.7 of a second. Ericsson needs to be closer to be able to make that move. I mentioned Eilert earlier on, Norris earlier on, not really throwing himself too much towards Mackinac. This kind of comes back to what we were saying at the start of the race, where he's going to be a little bit wary now. It's getting to that stage in the championship where suddenly you kind of, do I need to make that move? I'm so far ahead. Do I need to absolutely make that move on the guy who I've never really raced against?
I mean, the net totally, he needs to outscore his championship rivals by essentially 3 points to increase his lead from 73 to 76 points. And he knows that probably this is not going to be his best chance to do it because of the grid position that he's got. He knows he's got another qualifying session to come, and if he can get at the front there, he can easily claw those points back. If he gets a win and he's near his rival finishes second, he straight away he's getting 7 points back there. So the long game to an extent has got to be played here, but also, has he quite got the pace to be able to keep up with them? I'm not sure he has at the moment. So Norris falling back away from Makino. The gap to them is increased to over a second now. He's going to replay at the start. Watch for Ericsson then in the number 1 car, last year's rookie champion, second back on the right. And off the line, I mean, it was a decent getaway from everybody, really, wasn't it? Initially off the line, but it's as they go up through the gears. And watch the attack on the way into turn 1 from Ericsson. And you can see there, you can get some view of the uphill climb that they have on the run to turn 1 almost as soon as they get off the line there. So it's, it's a difficult place to get a start. Eilert covered off pretty quickly Gunter, but then it was Ericsson charging around the outside of Gunter into turn 1, and then up at turn 2, up at the hairpin at Remus, he was literally alongside gung-ho around the outside of Callum Eilert, because really that's the way the old driver's got great racecraft. He's not a reckless driver by any standards. In fact, his rate of finishing races is second to none, isn't it? He barely ever doesn't finish a race. He's almost always in the points. But he goes for it when he gets an opportunity, and he knows he's got to go for it and try and get the race wins here. And look at, you talked about the brutal sausage curbs there. There's a real example of that in the mid-pack, wasn't it, as they all ran wide. The cars getting badly damaged underneath if you do that too often.
And what really lost it, that's Florescu going off, who I misidentified. That was Ralph Aaron going off.
That was Ralph Aaron,
who I misidentified. Originally thought it was actually Habsburg. It wasn't. It was Ralph Aaron, and that's a collision you see between Newey and Mazepin from a few moments ago, which brings Beckman up to 6th, Schumacher 7th, Habsburg 8th, Guan Yu Zhu 9th, Pedro Piquet 10th.
And Jake Hughes 11th, just outside the points, having started at the back of the field. The British driver, who is now a race winner in the European Formula 3 Championships, been a race winner in everything he's done, but his maiden race win coming recently in the championship, and he's had a super drive so far. He can get one more place, he can get up into the points. He's obviously got some clear track in front of him, because Hughes is just at the fastest first sector of anybody. He's a couple of tenths quicker just through the first sector, which is only 22 seconds long, than anybody else. The other news to report is that, as you can see, the gap has come down slightly between the top two, from 0.7 to 0.5 of a second. And on the start of this lap, Ericsson's taken another tenth out of him.
But Islet's pulled another 2/10 away. It's a fastest sector of the entire race there from Islet at 37.0. What's interesting about this circuit is you do have those incredibly fast sections on the first part of the lap. We have two incredibly long straights, but once you get past turn 3, it's several corners. It's a little bit twisty. You still have the long run down into turn 3, but then you have the kind of more twisty section, and then the final sector of this lap really is the back end of the circuit, where you have several turns. I mean, there's very few corners on this circuit, but when you do need the grip for those corners, you really need the grip. So
it's the undulation as well, isn't it? You're dropping downhill through the last sector, almost all the way through till the start-finish line, through Vost Alpine, down through the double apex right hand of the last two corners, 7 and 8 Rint, and the final corner. And it's crucial to be brave through there, keep the speed going, not run too wide on the exit, but then you've got this uphill climb to turn 1, a very steep climb up to turn 2. So the last corner is critical. As we see, that gap, I think, potentially coming down fractionally. I think the first sector, Ericsson's a bit quicker. The middle of the lap, Ilott is slightly quicker than his Peugeot at the moment.
And this is where you start to see the setup differences between the cars. Islet with Prema Power Team probably have set the car up to actually get enough speed possible in the first sector on those long straights to actually get him Ericsson's probably set up for a more faster, try and draw him into Islet, but then Islet has a better setup for the middle part of this lap, and then maybe the latter part of the lap, where you need more downforce, a little bit more cornering pace, and that's actually drawing him back away from Ericsson. So it's a to and fro at the moment. The net lap times are near enough the same, but in the sectors, the fast sectors to the slow sectors, that's where you really see the difference.
Except Ilott's just set the fastest lap of the race. The top 4 have all set personal best, but Ilott with a 1:23.6 gets the gap out to 0.8 of a second. You're looking at the battle here for 7th place between two German drivers. David Bettman, number 55, and 25 there is the Prema driver, Mick Schumacher, who closed the gap on the previous lap down to a few tenths of a second. Very quick indeed in the first sector. So Schumacher having a good run here, a good race. How's Hughes getting on? He's still just outside the points, but his last lap time actually dropped back a little bit from Pedro Piquet, who is in the final points paid position. So after a super weekend with a win and a second at the Nürburgring last time out, Jake Hughes having to battle his way through here from a lowly grid position, but doing a good job. The high-tech driver, he picked up the team's first win for, I think it was over 12 months, and much needed tonic that. But Hughes having a good drive here, also making a bit of progress. Just behind him in 12th is Mawson. Daruvala made a bit of progress up to 13th place as well, and after they tripped through the gravel on the first lap of the race, Ralph Aron, who was 19th at the end of lap number 1, he's back up to 14th now. At Newey, by the way, never came back out of the pit, so he's he did, but his lap down just gone through, so he is best part of a lap down anyway, and looking like he's not going to finish in the points, I'm afraid, as the leader comes underneath the box over the start-finish line. The gap's come back down a little bit to 0.7 of a second, but the fastest lap's just gone to Max Gunther in 3rd place, only by a few hundredths, but he's quicker than the top 2.
What's interesting there is Gunther is basically green sectors across most of the lap there. He's not actually fastest overall at any sector, but actually able to kind of draw all 3 sectors around. What's interesting at this stage of the race, we're now nearly we're onto the 10th lap of this race. We're nearly 15 minutes in. We're not really seeing much in the way of drop-off. In fact, they're just getting quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker as the fuel load comes down. So these guys, they're still turning on. They're still turning in incredibly fast laps. The pace is still very, very, very good. So, and as we see...
keeping it up, yeah. It's about managing those tyres, isn't it, throughout the course of not just the race, but the weekend, making the limited amount of tyres that they have run through qualifying and the races. In the background, Demire's deceived me, or is Lando Norris getting a little bit closer at this time to Makino for 4th and 5th positions? Yeah, he was a bit quicker at the start of the lap. He's got a 10th back. It's not much, but a 10th of a second in F3 is quite a lot, isn't it? Because they're also evenly matched.
I think Makino's actually just dropped off slightly from the top 3 as well. So where we had a group of 5, it's beginning to split into 2 groups, like the top 3, and then you have Makino and Norris as they come around the final corners here. There's not many corners here. I mean, officially, there's only 10 corners on this circuit. So there's actually, we're not running through the tyres in the same way we would say at Zandvoort or other circuits on the calendar. Some of the corners are relatively quick as well. So yeah, the tyres are actually holding on a little bit longer because of that.
Just starting to go off a little bit now, the pace, isn't it, into the 123s. But Callum Eilert, 123.6, pulled another 2/10 clear of Ericsson. So the gap is a second now for the first time in the race as Joey Mawson comes into the pits with a problem, I'm afraid. He was outside the points anyway, but edging a bit closer towards the top 10 and maybe some points. But Mawson coming into the pits opposite the commentary box. What's been a frustrating weekend so far for the Van Amersfoort driver.
Frustrating season, really, unfortunately, for Joey Mawson. When he has had peaks, they've been quite good peaks, but there's often been quite a lot of lows as well. And it'll be good to see him come back next year, because I think there is a very quick driver. He's a guy who won the German Formula 4 Championship last year, so he is quick. He knows how to drive fast, but it's just
it's a big step. It's a big
step, and it's trying to translate that into Formula 3 can often be quite a very difficult task.
So there's your championship leader, Lando Norris, currently running in 5th place. So he's going to pick up 10 points. He's going to lose 15 to Callum Eilert. But it's Max Günther who is his closest championship rival, and Max is only on at the moment for 3rd place, and that would give him 15 points. So the 73-point gap from Norris to Günther is going to become, as it stands, a 68-point gap with 125 points still available. So it's still relatively comfortable, but it was never going to be wrapped up after this first race anyway. It could be wrapped up after the second race of the weekend. It could certainly be wrapped up by the end of the weekend, as long as he starts to claw some points back. He's getting ever closer to the tail of Makino, isn't he, here? The gap between them, just 0.5 of a second. Norris, again, a 10th quicker on the first sector of this lap.
If it does stay as it is, then the earliest Norris can win it would now go to race 3.
That would do. Take the pressure off, wouldn't it, going into the final round? If you got a chance to get it done and dusted, just in case you have a nightmare weekend, then it's always worth doing. It has happened in the past.
As Makino now, we see 4th place. He does a personal best in the first sectors. He tries his best to...
He's been spurred on, isn't he, I think, by Norris.
But I think he's going to be getting those messages over the radio, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. But he's in a position where he's been chased by Callum Eilert. He doesn't want to necessarily start driving in his mirrors as well, because that's where you really start to scrub off speed. That's where you really begin to lose concentration, and you're concentrating on things outside of what you should be doing at that particular time. And Norris half a second behind. It's level on this lap again, and as they come across the line, it's now 0.7 of a second. So Makino pulls out a little bit of space in the final sector. That is enough to hold Norris at bay, but if it gets to less than half a second, it's when you start kind of worrying a small bit. As we see Max Günther, he was dropped 1.2 behind Ericsson. Now he's 2.3 off the lead altogether.
Some laps he can do it, others he can't. You get the feeling he's having to be at the absolute max here to try and keep up and close the gap, Max Günther. So he's racing hard, not quite there. He could do with the top two having a bit of a battle, and then he could get stuck in. But at the moment, they're so evenly matched, these three. We certainly saw the top two evenly matched in qualifying. Ericsson has obviously upped the ante because he was a tenth and a half slower in qualifying, and he's right up there now as well. There's a really good battle going on. We're not seeing too much of it on camera for the final point as well, because Jake Hughes has finally caught up to Pedro Piquet, and those two have been running within half a second of each other for the last couple of laps. Hughes caught up on the previous lap. Piquet responded by being a few hundredths quicker last time around. So a very good scrap going on between those two. Here, Lando Norris in 5th place, just fallen back again. So Makino's doing a super job here, isn't he? With the championship leader behind him, putting on pressure at times. Makino is holding his own here, very much so.
And there's also an element to both Lando and with the guys just ahead. As we see a yellow flag, someone's gone off at turn 5. Can't see who it is, but it's a green flag now, so it must be all good. You can keep charging for lap after lap after lap, but you can also that can all in itself become a kind of a metronome, as it were, and you fall into a kind of trance. So sometimes it's best to just drop off a small bit, maybe drop a half a second behind, regroup, and then charge again. See what other areas or what other positions that you can try and overtake on. Because if you just follow a guy around, before you know it, the checkered flag comes out, and you've missed any opportunity to actually overtake someone, because you just get into a trance and the laps tick over.
Floresco, I think it was, that had the moment. He's just come through and lost 6 seconds on that lap, did a 1:30. Should be doing 1:24s, 1:23s at the moment. So Floresco had a brief moment. A difficult race for the remaining, the ex-British F4 race winner, racing in the Euro Open Formula this season. So exactly a second, the gap between the top two. 23.57 for the leader, Eilert, last time round. 23.59 for Ericsson in second place. It's almost as if he knew, realistically, his best chance was going to be on that first lap, and you cannot fault the commitment of Joel Eriksson on that first lap. He threw the kitchen sink at Callum Eilert, but in fairness to Callum, who has already this year alone in the championship, his third season in the championship, already been, what, a 6-time race winner. He knows how to handle it, and he dusted him off and did a very good job to keep the lead of the race. Through he goes.
And fastest lap from Callum Eilert there. This is what I mean. They've dropped off slightly. Now they're going to go for one last time. The top 5 all set personal best in Sector 1 on that lap alone. And it's a fastest lap for Eilert. And it was a personal best from Ericsson and a personal best from McEnroe and a personal best from Norris as well. So these guys are still charging. And we're on to the 15th lap of this race. As you see, a notice on the screen, the incident between Mazepan and Newey is going to be investigated after this race. As we see a shot of Callum Eilert.
It's a great tracking shot, isn't it, of Callum there, the race leader, as he makes his way at the top of the course there. You can see the elevation there, looking down towards the paddock from the top of the course. That's coming out of Remus on the run down towards turn 3 at Rouse. So there is the race leader looking comfortable now, and he's done this time and time again this season, Callum Eilert, when he's been able to qualify on pole and hold the lead through the first lap. He looks comfortable, control in a zone, and he's doing a terrific job. So the British driver leading by 1.1 seconds now after that very quick lap that Lee mentioned. Through goes second Ericsson, Gunter in third, Makino there in fourth. There is Lando Norris in 5th place. Ferdinand Habsburg having a good run in 6th place now. Mick Schumacher 7th, ahead of David Beckman in 8th, but only 0.4 of a second clear. Those two Germans still close together. Guan Yu Zhu is about a second behind them in 9th place. Piquet and Hughes still trading quick lap times in 10th and 11th positions for the final point.
And I just wonder now if Callum has finally broken the back of this race. We see in the middle sector and the final sectors, Ericsson and Gunther and McEnroe, their times beginning to drop off, and they're now nearly half a second a lap slower than Eilert. So I think this finally has done the job for Callum, as we see Mick Schumacher go well wide exiting turn 1 as he's under pressure from David Beckman.
I think also used a bit of curb there, didn't he? Quite a bit of curb, actually, as he, I think he took the car right to the edge of the circuit.
He would have felt that. He would have really felt that.
Shows the commitment, though, doesn't it? That he's putting just to try and find a way past Schumacher. There is Schumacher, 7th there. Beckman in 8th place. Bit of a gap back now developed to Guan Yu Zhu. Jake Hughes has just set the fastest first sector of anybody in the race so far to get a couple of tenths on Pedro Piquet. So the gap now down to 0.4 of a second. There's no point finishing 11th, is there? He's surely going to have a go if he gets half a chance in these closing 10 minutes or so of the race to try and get that championship point. But Piquet fending him off well so far.
And Piquet himself still also setting personal bests as well. So it's not as if Piquet's actually losing tons of speed. It just so happens that Hughes really has it hooked up at this particular moment in time. As we see Mick Schumacher, and he's got David Beckman in the motor park right there. The gap up front now 1.8 seconds as Ericsson and Gunther and McEnroe and Norris all climb back into the 1 minute 23s.
Somebody we haven't seen much at all really in this race, but we should welcome along to the championship is the Canadian driver Devlin De Francesco, who is a former race winner again in the British Formula 4 Championship, certified by FIA and powered by Ford EcoBoost, racing the Euro Formula Open Series this year, in which he's running in the top 5 in the championship, and currently running in 16th place. He's with the Carlin team, who he's had an association with over the last few years, but it's good to see, isn't it, Lee? Lots of drivers here and at the previous round at the Nürburgring dipping their toe in. De Francesco's going to do the last couple of rounds. He'll be at Hockenheim as well, and getting a taste of what it's going to be like, presumably, to come into the championship in 2018.
Absolutely, it's good to see all these young talent coming through, and from the regional Formula 4 championships that are taking place in the UK and in Italy and in Germany and Japan and etc. And you know, this championship is very relevant. It's very fresh on the FIA ladder. So with offer super license points that these guys, they want to end up in Formula One. You need to finish high up in these championships to actually score those super license points. So here is the place to be.
Ferdinand Habsburg in 6th place. He might be 4.5 seconds back on this battle for 4th between Makino and Norris, but he's every bit as quick as them. Now all 3 of them lapping. That's 2 laps on the trot now. The 1:23.8. So Makino 1:23.89, Norris 1:23.88, 1:23.88 for Habsburg as well. So if he could just bridge the gap, he's very much on the pace here. So Habsburg had to fight his way through, as I say, only 10th quickest in the qualifying session yesterday, and carrying then a 3-place grid penalty, but he's done well to get himself as high up the order as he has. And Ferdinand Habsburg, whatever changes they've made to the car, because they were deep into the night looking at the data last night, have obviously worked. He's going very well.
And it's unfortunate, I think. He got caught out earlier on this race and was locked behind the Mazepin-Newey battle for quite some time, and that's probably where an awful lot of that time, he's got a 4.6 second gap to 5th place Lando Norris, and that's where a lot of that time kind of fell away to. So once Newey and Mazepin took each other out of the running, he's in clear air and actually setting very good times, as you said, into 23.8s. Just up there with the top 5 runners who are in their 26s to the 23.6s to the 23.8s themselves.
So there is the number 3 car of Max Gunter, BWT branding on it. Back into the pits comes Harrison Newey. Kind of a test session now before Harrison and the VAR team as they prepare for this afternoon's late afternoon qualifying session, which is going to be oh so important for tomorrow's races. So Ilott 1.8 seconds clear now. Again, on that last lap, he was the best part of half a tenth quicker than Ericsson. The gap creeping out now. Gunter's slipped back to nearly 5 seconds back now on the race leader. 1:23.8 he's doing, so he's losing about 0.3 of a second per lap. Makino, Norris and Habsburg are all as quick as him, but not really closing the gap. So Gunter should be okay for the final place on the podium, and if he does that, it's going to be his 10th podium of the, no, he's going to be his 14th podium of the season. So a very consistent year for Max Gunter.
A bit of issues there actually for Newey. They've taken the engine cover off and look like they're really working on the back of the car. So I think that's probably, unfortunately, a day done really for the young Briton.
6 3/4 minutes to go. Callum Ilott leading the way in the zone and looking comfortable now. Has not put a wheel wrong to the naked eye at least, and has been pulling these very quick lap times, especially the second half of the race. Having said that, he goes a bit wide coming out of the final turn into the shadows underneath the grandstand. Over the line he goes. He's still being kept honest, that's for sure, by Jarl Ericsson as they go up towards turn 1. And actually on that lap, Ericsson's a fraction quicker. It's only 0.5 of a second, but 1.7 seconds. He's not going to catch up at that rate of knots. So more often than not, every time Ericsson closes the gap, he just seems to be managing this. He's able to pull back away by a fraction whenever he wants to as well. So there you can see the gap from 2nd to 3rd now pretty big. Is 3rd to 4th, is that gap potentially going to be one for Max Gunter to worry about the closing stages? Because on that lap, he did a 1:23.7, Makino did a 1:23.8, but Norris did a 1:23.6. So it's concertinaing up a little bit between those 3 drivers.
It was a personal best actually for Lando Norris, so I think he's beginning that last charge for Makino for 4th place. I've just seen Mick Schumacher really riding the curbs. You don't want to do that because that will damage the floor, which will wreck the handling of these cars.
Got to be careful of the front wing end plates as well here. Don't get damaged, but Mick Schumacher on a decent run here. He's going to be on the rookie podium, isn't he? Norris, Schumacher and Daruvala back in 13th of the top 3 rookies. So they get a podium and trophies for the top 3 rookies as well as the top 3 overall. One
of the notes actually about race leader Callum Ilott that we need to think about as well is how important was that wheel-to-wheel tussle he had in the first lap with Joel Ericsson.
That's critical. Yeah.
Going down into turn 2 and actually holding this wheel.
Critical because they both know they need to win a lot, quite a few of the remaining 6 races to have a properly realistic chance of closing the gap to Norris, unless Norris has some disasters somewhere. So they've just got to go for race wins now. Podiums are fine, and Ericsson, yes, he's taking points away. So too is Gunter taking points away from Norris, but the extra 7 you get between 1st and 2nd is absolutely crucial. So that was nobody was going to give way between Ilott and Ericsson on that first lap, knowing what was at stake. The 7-point swing there, and even at that, you know, it's still going to be difficult for them to catch Norris, but they've got to go for the wins now, and you can see that in the body language of the drivers through that first lap. But it was good, clean racing, wasn't it, from both of them? Fighting hard, but giving each other room as well. As we look at Max Gunter trying to just hang on for a podium finish here. Makino being pushed along by Norris, who, as Lee said, set a personal best lap pretty late on in the race, last couple of laps around. And the gap between Makino and Norris now just 0.5 of a second. And again, he was a bit quicker through the first sector by half a tenth. So he's just chipping away at this Lando Norris. But if he catches him, is he going to pull off a big risk? Because fifth, and the points you get for that, the 10 points, is that worth risking for a daredevil move to pick up another couple of points if you get fourth place? Or do you then start thinking championship? Possibly the latter, but we'll see. Racing drivers will be racing drivers.
I said if it stays like this, you know, Norris's lead over Gunther is still going to be 68 points, and with 125 left, that is still an absolutely enormous lead. And if it stays like this, we will see Eilert actually jump Ericsson in the championship. It'll give Eilert a 2-point advantage coming into qualifying for race 2 today.
Yeah, so 5 behind him, wasn't he? Yeah, absolutely. Another good reason that they had that battle, wasn't it? Because they're very close to each other on the points. Now, Lando Norris started to wind things up here. Final 3 minutes left on the clock. They get another lap added on once the time is run out. 33 minutes plus 1 lap. Car going slowly in the background there, but being lapped, I think. So we'll see. That was...
Is that Newey?
Yes. No, it was possibly Floresco's car. We'll see, just sort of in the background. But front runners... all okay there. The gap from 4th to 5th, and feigning some interest for the first time here is Lando Norris. The first time really that he's just shown his nose, just started to really wind the pressure up on Makino. But Makino quick coming out of the corner as they run through West Alpine down towards the final couple of turns on the lap through Rindt, and the final turn. That will be critical to get close there. You see the track dropping away now and carry the speed onto the straight up towards the first corner. But Norris definitely showing some intent there. A little, it wasn't a move, but he was showing his nose, just trying to distract the Japanese driver up ahead in the mirrors. 2 minutes left on the clock. The race leader goes through. It's 1 minute 23 seconds for the front runners. So 3 laps remaining with the extra lap added on. And a fight between these two is going to have Max Gunter out, because Max should then start to edge back away from these two if they start to fight each other. But Makino's responded well, but certainly in the middle of the lap, and probably the first sector as well. That's where Norris definitely had the edge. He comes through, 22.198 for Makino, 22.225 for Norris. So the gap opens up there, and that's what I mean about Makino going well. Habsburg, it is just in the background, who did a 123.6 last time around. So he's catching them as well, but I think too far back to make a real impression. Ralph Aron, trying to come back into the points, has just set the fastest first sector of anybody. He's in 12th place, the high-tech driver, with a 22.0, though. He's a couple of tenths quicker even than the race leader through the first sector. So he's done well to manage the tyres, given that he's obviously been pushing quite hard to come back through the order, being 19th at the end of the first lap.
And now we see on screen Norris still really trying hard with Makino. I think the problem Norris has is he is potentially much faster than Makino, but he's not fast in the right sectors of the lap to actually get close enough to make an overtake. Because I think, as we see coming onto the start-finish straight, Makino will pull away somewhat, and he'll make just enough of a gap to actually draw himself far enough ahead of Norris to actually nullify any kind of gains Norris has made in the last 2 sectors of the previous lap, as we see Habsburg, who set the fastest middle sector.
I think they're just so evenly matched, these two, and they were in qualifying yesterday. Lando Norris was 4th fastest with a 123.548, 123.574 for Makino, so there's only 26 thousandths of a second between them. That's where he gets close, isn't it, through turn 2, but Makino now he's going to have to work hard. Gunter not that far ahead of them in 3rd place. The clock is about to tick down to 0. Norris now for the first time really gets alongside. Makino's got the better line into the right-hander. It's got to be tidy on the exit. Norris trying to swing back on the exit here, but this is real prolonged pressure here from Norris, who tries to go wide, carries the run, just trying to find a gap up the inside there. He deliberately let the car run wide so he could try and force a gap up the inside for the next turn. He gets almost touch contact there side by side, and he's got the inside line this time for this corner, and round he goes into 4th place. Utter commitment. Lando Norris really doesn't need to do this sort of thing with a championship lead, but he is a born racer, and that was a great bit of dicing for 3 corners side by side. Makino did his best, but Norris was coming through, wasn't he? And an extra couple of points gained.
I take it back. I take it back. Yeah, he just got more than a good enough run coming down turn 2 to actually put. And we saw he made a little bit of a look coming into turn 2, but had just a good enough run down into the long straight into turn 3 to make it work. At that stage, Makino was actually destabilised. He'd lost concentration, and it just.
It was an intelligent move because you could see him setting it up 1 or 2 corners before, couldn't you? And he knew exactly where he was going to go for the final move. Makino made it life hard for him, but it was good, clean racing. But up to 4th place now for Lando Norris. So the gap won't be coming down quite so much for Max Günther. We're on the last lap of the race. The class of the field in this race has been Callum Ilott. Joel Eriksson has kept him honest, and there was that great dice between them for the first lap of the race. But Ilott, once they got past turn 3, has never really looked back, has he? Eriksson stayed with him very much so for the first half of the race. But Ilott always in control of this race for Prema Power Team. Over the brow he comes here. Metronomic, inch perfect. 4th in the championship. He's about to become 3rd in the championship for Callum Ilott. He's about to pick up another win. Picking up wins earlier in the season at Silverstone, at Monza, at the Hungaroring, at the Nürburgring, and now he takes a race victory here at Spielberg in Austria by just under 2 seconds. Callum Ilott wins the race. Joel Eriksson 2nd, Max Günther 3rd, Lando Norris with a brave final lap or 2 there to get 4th place away from Tadasuke Makino, who now takes another top 5 finish to add to the 4th place he picked up at the Nürburgring last time around. And Ferdinand Habsburg with a good comeback drive there to 6th place. Mick Schumacher was 7th, David Beckman in 8th place, Guan Yu 9th, and Pedro Piquet held on to the final point despite all of the pressure that was coming from Jake Hughes, who came from the back of the grid. So Piquet doing a good job there to pick up the final point of the first race of the weekend here at Spielberg.
Brilliant drive there from Callum. Lights the flag, held off Joel Eriksson where it was absolutely necessary in the first lap. It's a 7th Formula 3 victory in total in the 3 seasons he's been here, and it just about keeps Ilott and Eriksson in the championship hunt just as we go with only 5 races left after this. But Ilott's not going to be thinking about that for the moment. He's going to be happy to be back on the winners' podium after what has been a little bit of a dry spell. I think his last race win was in Hungaroring. Yep. In June. No, sorry, it was Zandvoort. He won race 2 in Zandvoort 2 rounds ago.
Got a podium and a couple of 4ths at Nürburgring last time out. This was a driver that was finishing 1st and 2nd in a lot of the races early season. Was the early season leader, Joel Eriksson. But back to form, that confirmation of the provisional results and the top 10 finishers in that race. Callum Ilott with a well-deserved victory there, which is his 4th of the season. 4th of the season, 5th of the season, and his 7th career victory. Callum Ilott there doing absolutely everything right. Jake Hughes just outside the points after a good comeback drive. Good comeback from his teammate Ralph Aron as well after a disappointing first lap of the race. Norris, Schumacher and Daruvala are the top 3 rookies who will get their position on the podium as well. We might not get to see the podiums because of the late start. And here we go, 393 points. The gap is now 70. If he's 75 or more clear, or 76 clear to be absolutely certain going into the final round, he'll be there. Should drivers tie on points, it goes down to number of race wins. But 70 clear of Günther. Callum Ilott then moving ahead of Joel Eriksson, was 5 behind. He's now 2 in front. So important that. You'll see the reaction here from Callum Ilott and the team. They've got this really important qualifying session this afternoon, which is going to be streamed live on the FIA European Formula 3 website, because another pole position going to be absolutely critical here. Lando Norris looking over the moon with his 4th place, but I think that's a decent job from where he was, and with points to think about, and with that very good move on the penultimate lap of the race. There, the team congratulating, the Italian team congratulating their British driver, Max Günther there. Pats him on the shoulder as well, off the back of another podium finish. And they're the top 3 cars coming into the scrutineering area. So they'll be making their way up onto the podium very shortly indeed. But for these drivers, you get the sense that it is kind of job ticked off, but they're still in work mode here. they've still got a big job to do this afternoon, as I say, with qualifying and the 2 races to come. Vast majority of cars managing to finish the race. Devlin DeFrancesco finishes his first FIA European Formula 3 race in 16th place to get some valuable data and experience behind the wheel of the car. Norbert Haug there, congratulating the race winner, powered, of course, by a Mercedes engine, the Prema Power team. And there, the cars having done their job. Still, most of them lapping in the mid-123s in the last couple of laps of the race. And it was only the very low 22s that were low 23s that were fastest laps. So still kept the pace up. Smooth surface here. Here's the moment that, weaving left to right, Callum Ilott took the checkered flag here at the Red Bull Ring. And you can see by the reaction how much that meant to him. But a controlled drive, that. And when Callum Ilott is on pole position at the head of the field, he's hard to beat, isn't he, Lee?
He is absolutely masterful once he gets out front, and knows how to control the race, knows how to control the pace. Helped a little that, yes, there is pretty minimal tyre wear in this race, but it becomes quite critical later on in the weekend because there's actually very limited amount of tyre usage this weekend. Then with qualifying session later on today, then you actually get into the strategy of you've got to choose, do you run like worn tyres in race 2 or race 3? Which would benefit, you know, your potential race starts, etc. So
where you are on the grid affects that quite a lot, doesn't it? You've got your best grid position. You've got to try and maximise that and use your best tyres for it as well. There's Max Günther. You can see, working hard. It's not the hottest day. The sun coming out, working hard. Jarl Ericsson coming through there. The super cool Swede. Bright futures ahead, certainly, for all 3 of these drivers and many more on the grid. There, Callum in the background, the white and red race suit. Max Günther doesn't look overjoyed. I guess he felt probably needed to win that one, but it was always going to be tough, wasn't it?
But he also lost the front row as well because he lost out to Ericsson off the start. So he's going to be quite disappointed to have lost. In a sense, he probably feels like he's lost points to Norris to a degree, because he knowing that Norris was going to be starting 4th.
Adrian Newey there, multiple Formula 1 World Championship car designer, dad of Harrison Newey, unfortunately had a difficult race in that one, didn't he? And Rennie Ross texting the results through. Had a good start to the weekend, he says. More to do. Always enthusiastic down there, especially when their man is on the top step of the podium. Callum Ilott, the race winner here at the Red Bull Ring here in Spielberg, makes his way to the top step of the podium. Jarl Ericsson, great respect between these 2 drivers. A fine effort on the start of the race. He almost did it. 2nd place for him, and hopping up to the final step of the podium. Max Günther there, closest to you, the camera, in 3rd place. The winning team, of course, Prema, and so their team representative will come up to collect a trophy for the team as well, as we get our race winners' national anthem. So many congratulations to our first race winner of the weekend, Callum Ilott. Hope you enjoyed our coverage. Much more to come from the FIA Formula 3 European Championship over the weekend here in Spielberg. Bye for now.